The Bengals bungle without Joe Burrow, plus two more running backs go down with long-term injuries. We react to the Week 3 games and tell you whose fantasy stock is up or down on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
This episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every moment count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward, Mazda Move and Be Moved. We have a lot to react to for Week 3. We have more injuries. We have more disappointing performances from guys that we needed to have big weeks for fantasy. And then we had guys that stepped up that we weren't necessarily counting on this week. So we'll get to all of that fun stuff, plus end today's show with our waiver wire rankings to help you get those set up for your Tuesday night actions there. First off, we got to start with this Bengals offense because, man, Jake Browning gave us a little bit of hope when he had to come in for Joe Burrow in Week 2. But then against the Vikings, they get absolutely demolished. And Jake Browning looks terrible. Can't get anything going. You know, Jamar Chase, really not good game. At 5 receptions, 50 yards. Like, that's not what we're looking at for Jamar Chase. T. Higgins, 1 reception, 15 yards, invisible out there. And Chase Brown's efficiency it hasn't been good this year, but plummeted without Joe Burrow. He averaged 0.3 yards per carry, had 4 receptions, but only for 17 yards, and there was just no touchdowns to be had. So what are you going to do about this offense? They get the Broncos next week in Denver. Not great. And then the Lions and then at the Packers, a tough 3-game stretch.
Yeah, this is the concern I had. I mean, it was either going to be sloppy, they were going to put up some numbers, or it was going to be just sloppy and stay sloppy. And that's what happened here. For Jake Browning, look, I thought he was going to just gunsling and put up some garbage, at least in this game, even if they lost. But that didn't happen. I think the problem is the Bengals defense can't stay off the field here with teams running on them. And then where on the field in offense, I mean, their offensive line stinks. The interior is part of the reason why things broke down for Joe Burrow. It's part of the reason why Chase Brown is struggling. The middle is just really bad now for the Bengals. The outside was not very good. Now the middle is not very good either. So, look, these are some things we saw, but what happened was Joe Burrow masked a lot of these problems, right? He just was good at that. He got the ball quickly. He got it to his receivers. But now it's like contagious. It's not just Jake Browning turning over the ball. Jamar Chase lost a fumble. Like, this was just ill-prepared for this game. Maybe they went in a little bit overconfident. I don't know why, because they were facing a really tough spot at 2-0 against Vikings. So it was pretty steady, right? They got 2 plays from Isaiah Rodgers. Carson Wentz was there. So the Bengals really made sure that they beat themselves early in this game, and then it all went downhill from here. So you're right. The Broncos matchup is tricky to think about next week. It was a bit of a wild game for the Chargers. There wasn't anything too heavy there except the ground game with Amari and Hampton that really came through in that matchup against Denver. But for this dysfunctional offense, it's really hard. I don't know if you can straight up afford to sit Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Chase Brown. I mean, these are high guys you drafted. They're going to get the volume. They're going to get the targets. You just need them to produce. So this is a really tough spot here with the main Bengals players.
I'm fine with sitting Chase Brown and probably T. Higgins for now. Jamar Chase is going to keep being in your lineup. Like, 5 for 50 is bad, but like if he would have just got a touchdown, you would have been happy with it. So hopefully you can come down with one next week. But I mean, if he gets Patrick Surtain, it's going to be even harder. Now, an offense that makes no sense what happened this last week. The Atlanta Falcons. I mean, a 0 burger against the Panthers defense. How is that possible? But now Michael Penix Jr. the last 2 weeks, 5.3 fantasy points and 3.8. So if he has a couple big games here and there, I'm not going to risk putting him into my lineup. Like, I don't think he's a playable guy. Drake London, though, huge disappointment. Again, has yet to score over 10 fantasy points in a game this season, despite getting the target. So, I mean, Drake London right now is looking like a low-end wide receiver 2 at best. Like, you can play him, but don't expect too much. And then besides Bijan Robinson, you're not getting much out of this offense.
Yeah, they fooled us a little bit. I mean, Michael Penix looked pretty good down the stretch last year. He was connecting well with London. He was connecting well with Kyle Pitts. I'm not quite sure what happened here. I mean, I think the Panthers were just more confident, ready to play. It was much like the Vikings-Bengals game, and sometimes 0-2 teams, we've seen this a lot, come up with a lot of energy. The Falcons may have been a bit sluggish, right? They played a night game last week at a big emotional win in Minnesota, but still, it doesn't excuse the fact that they scored 0 points in this game. I know Penix was not good. I mean, it just seemed like they were not that put together, and they should be, right? I mean, Bijan Robinson should be running better here. London should be holding on to balls. They should be able to get more people open in the Falcons' offense that we didn't see materialize. So I'm not sure if the Kirk Cousins change is going to come, and if they're going to just say, we're going to roll with Michael Penix, good or bad, and we're going to go up in flames and our offense is bad, but their defense is not very good. I know they looked okay in week 2, getting a lot of sacks and turnovers against the Vikings, but that's it. I mean, that was a bit of a flash there, but when they're facing just a competent offense that doesn't turn over the ball, it's going to be pretty rough here. So, again, Drake London, I don't think he's now an every week start. We're going to have to reevaluate that from week to week. I mean, Kyle Pitts certainly wasn't, and he was a sleeper that we look at, but we're going to got to go away from him. Bijan, you just hope for the best. I mean, he's still their main guy. I know you like Tyler Algier. So much for the positive game script in this one. They just threw that out the window. So, again, I don't know what to do. But, again, the difference is the Bengals, you draft a lot of those guys very high in your team. So that's a little tougher decision. With the Falcons, other than Bijan, I think you can afford to pivot until you see a quarterback change or Penix plays better or there's the right matchup for him.
Now, the Cowboys, another disappointing offense this week. Dak Prescott, not 2 out of 3 weeks, so not good fantasy performance. He's going to be week to week where you can decide whether to play him or not as a streaming option. But, I mean, this Bears game looked like an amazing one, and he throws 2 interceptions, only 1 touchdown. He did lose CeeDee Lamb in the middle of the game with a high ankle sprain, so that's unfortunate. Javonte Williams had an efficient day, but not a good fantasy day. It was just 10 carries for 76 yards, wasn't utilized in the passing game. Really, Jake Ferguson and George Pickens had a nice game, but Jake Ferguson with 14 targets. But with Dak, I mean, he's definitely losing some stock there. Let's talk about some of these running backs really quick, because Rhamondre Stevenson, after a huge week 2, he fumbles the ball twice and loses both fumbles. And Antonio Gibson fumbled. It was the entire reason they lost this game, right? They had no reason to lose this game against the Steelers. They were the better team, but they just kept fumbling the ball in huge situations. And Stevenson has had these issues with fumbles. It's why he got benched by the last coaching staff. So TreVeyon Henderson, who they took at the top of the 2nd round, I do think he's going to start getting some more work. He did lead this backfield finally in offensive snaps, and it has to do with those fumbles lost by Stevenson.
Yeah, he has a real chance to get going this week. I mean, much more chance than the Cowboys. They're going to play the Packers, and that defense is going to be angry. They didn't really slump in the win over Cleveland. It was the offense that was bad, but now you look at the Patriots. They get the Panthers at home. That's a very favorable spot here for maybe TreVeyon Henderson to get going if they give him enough touches, right? And really, I mean, Drake May still compiled, put up some points there when you look at it overall, but the Hunter Henry was feeling it with him, but they need that running back weapon to be really effective in this offense. And again, I think they're reluctant to play Henderson now. I don't think there's any excuse. They got to see what they have in the rookie to spark this offense. They're now 1-2. So I think you go in that direction. I think this could be a sneaky game between the Panthers and Patriots where both teams can maybe put up some points in this one that are kind of lesser offenses, but are going to be raised by each other's defenses. So I'm excited to see what happens there, especially the way the Panthers also played overall against Atlanta.
Now, Bill Krosky-Merritt, we're all excited to see him in a starting role without Austin Eckler. Well, it was Chris Rodriguez who started the game and got the majority of the carries. He led that backfield with 11. Now, Krosky Merritt came through with a touchdown later in the game to save it from being an atrocious game. He did still also lead the backfield in snaps, but it's only at 39.7%. Chris Rodriguez was at 37.9%. And then Jeremy McNichols got in there too much too at 26% of the time. So this looks like a three-headed monster. That's a headache. So we were excited about, maybe Krosky Merritt getting this workhorse role, but it doesn't look like he's going to get it.
Yeah, and look, this is what everyone's looking for the Commanders. They are a spread-it out offense. They're going to use a lot of people, and this is what makes them effective, too, at Cliff Kingsbury. I mean, Marcus Mariota comes there. They kind of run the same offense with different people involved in different spots. And, again, their running back was always set to be a committee. There was not going to be one guy, period. I mean, they just had too many options, right? They just need to sort out who was their healthy and best options. Now, with Austin Eckler off the board, they need to get people who are more dynamic in passing situations, either with protection or catching passes. And I think Rodriguez and McNichols have some of that ability that Merritt is still, or Jakrowski Merritt is trying to kind of put it all together, right? So I think that's why they want to trust as a veteran team. In a lot of cases, they're one of the oldest rosters in the NFL. They want to win now. They're going to go with their trusted guys sometimes, and that could be by situation with the offense.
Now the Cardinals had to face their first real opponent because they faced the Panthers and the Panthers and the Saints the first 2 weeks. But Kyler Murray again with a disappointing game with just 14 fantasy points. Hasn't had a big game yet. And Marvin Harrison now over the last 2 weeks, just a huge disappointment. So just the same as last year. They need to fire Drew Petzing before this passing game is going to even have a chance to look any better. So I'm just kind of giving up hope in Kyler and Marvin Harrison here. But they also lost James Conner to a season-ending ankle injury. That's not going to make it any better for this offense. But Trey Benson's going to step up now, and his stock is looking way up. So we'll talk about Trey Benson and other running backs who's going to see their workload increase after some injuries right after a quick break. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, easy, and honestly one of the best ways to follow along with football. Zay Flowers tonight has a projection of more than 69.5 receiving yards against the Lions. He's hit over 75 yards in both of his first 2 games of the season. So download the Prize Picks app today to get your lineup in and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, let's get into the players whose fantasy stock is looking up after week 3. And Trey Benson definitely has to be at the top of this list because James Conner goes down with that season-ending ankle injury. He's going to go through, under surgery and officially be done for the year. Trey Benson got 10 carries in this week 3 game against the 49ers. He was efficient enough at 4.2. He's going to be utilized as a pass catcher now too without Conner. So, I mean, as much as the Cardinals offense isn't looking great, Benson still, needs to be picked up if he's on waivers, and his fantasy stock is definitely rising greatly after this injury.
Yeah, I think he'll be needed a lot as a receiver in this upcoming game. It's a Thursday nighter, so you want to get on it and plug Benson in your lineup and don't waste time. And just realize he's the guy. If you were listening, you would have maybe had him on your roster. You're not scrambling to get him, but he's available in a lot of leagues right now. It's kind of interesting that they kind of were using him early in the season because we didn't really see that last year. It was kind of the James Conner thing, but we said this is going to happen at some point. I mean, he's getting older. Conner, the attrition was there. It was about to happen. And another player that had avoided injury for much of his career, go figure, they're 2 former Steelers lead backs that get hurt in yesterday's action, but this is just massive for Amari and Hampton people. This is not the greatest, but if you have a league where somebody gave up on Hampton and you can look that way, Najee Harris goes down with a likely torn Achilles here. Hampton does do his thing against the Broncos. Finally, they get the Giants this week, one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. So let's go. If we're worried about Hampton and his stock, it's up. Ashton Genty, by the way, not as good at this stage of the season with not as good of an offensive line, but Hampton definitely and Benson are the big winners of the results of this past weekend, unfortunately for Harrison Connor.
Yeah, and Hampton finally looked good too, right? Over 100 and nearly 130 total yards. He got a touchdown on the ground, 19 carries, 7 targets. So yeah, he's going to be heavily utilized now without Najee Harrison, like you brought up. They get the Giants this week, and then the Commanders, and then the Dolphins. So a nice 3-week stretch. So if you were worried about Hampton over the first 2 weeks, now you can kind of breathe it out that you took him early, because he's going to at least get the workload and the snaps, which we saw go down so much last week in week 2. So we can feel confident in that, but that does stink for Najee Harris, and he'll be out for the season. Now, Jordan Mason filled in for Aaron Jones, who was placed on IR right before week 3. So he gets the next 4, at least the next 3 games to himself again. And he, even with this team up by so much, he kept getting the ball even later in the game, but 2 touchdowns. He got 16 carries, 116 yards. And if this team didn't blow out the Bengals so much, it probably would have even been more than that later in the fourth quarter. But he looked really, really good. I heard 7.3 yards per carry, and he's clearly going to get the goal line work. So he gets the Steelers next week. He's a must play.
Yeah, it's a must play every week now. We were on the fence a little bit with him in terms of the role and what was going to happen, but that didn't matter at this stage. I mean, we didn't also expect the Vikings to be so far in control of this game where they could just turn over the game to the running game. It just kind of disappointed a little bit of people who were looking for more from Justin Jefferson in the passing game, but they didn't need it because Mason was going nuts here. This is turning out to be one of the better pickups of the offseason of any team right now. Maybe you look at Devontae Adams, Tyquan Thornton, or up there with the guys that have had impact on their teams. But Mason, again, he's carrying this team, and I think they're going to lean a lot on him. So it's kind of everything lined up. Aaron Jones got hurt. They don't really have other options. They need to lean on him because J.J. McCarthy was struggling, and they need to take pressure off Carson Wentz. So everything's lining up well for Jordan Mason. They get the Steelers this week in Dublin, by the way, so you have to get up early there. So make sure he's in your lineup there on Sunday morning, 9:30 Eastern.
Now, Quinshon Judkins for the Browns in his second game, because he started his first NFL game last week, right? And he comes in the second week. It's even more usage. He's, again, a team high in snaps. 18 carries on the day. Dylan Sampson was the only other running back in the backfield to get a carry, and it was just 1 carry for 2 yards. But Judkins was 94 yards on the ground and a touchdown. He got a couple targets, but what's really promising about this is that he averaged 5.2 yards per carry. Looked good against the Packers, really, really good defense, right? So, if we don't necessarily have to be worried about matchups then. Now, the Browns were able to keep it close in this game because their defense stopped the Packers. I guess that's our biggest worry, is if the Browns start getting beat up on, then maybe they go away from the run. But Judkins is looking like a guy that you can plug in with confidence moving forward, and that his snaps are only going to increase at this point because the team is really, really leaning on him.
Yeah, that's the kind of saving grace right now of the Browns. They have the number 1 run defense in the NFL. They've been spectacular in that asset. And that's going to keep you around in some games, right? Which is good for the game script, where they're just not going to give up a lot, and they have a stinky offense where they're going to have to get into pass-happy mode, right? They can keep some games close well into the third quarter. I mean, they were in this game the whole way, and they were even trailing in this one 10-0, and they stuck with the running game. So the Browns know what they need to do, and that's the way they can be the most competitive. This week they get the Lions. It's, again, a tricky matchup. We're in Detroit. We just want to make sure that they don't fall behind big early, and then they have to go away. But I think that would say, hey, it's more of a Dylan Sampson game because you have to check down and throw to him if they get up big. So, again, Judkins, this is why they drafted him. I think they want this Judkins-Sampson thing to be what their backfield looks like in the long term, and maybe also their best offensive kind of combination here until they decide to make a quarterback change and unlock some of these veteran receivers again.
Now, Caleb Williams is a great week against the Cowboys. This is what we expected out of both sides of that game with Dallas, but it only came on the Bears side. Right now, he has scored 29 points on the week, so he's the quarterback 1 on the week so far, with the game tonight still to go with Jared Goff and Lamar Jackson. But Williams is the quarterback 3 so far in the season in points per game, behind Lamar, behind Josh Allen. Those are the only 2 guys he's behind. 2 fantastic fantasy days. One, mediocre one in week 2 with just 17 points that he was benched pretty much in the fourth quarter. But Caleb Williams is looking like a guy that you can also start with confidence moving forward. He gets the Raiders next week, and the Commanders just did whatever they wanted against that defense, even with Marcus Mariota back there.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears are feeling it now. I mean, they just need to get a few games to get going. They also needed to involve everybody, throw their trick plays in there. Luther Burden was suddenly a big factor in what they were doing. DJ Moore even scored later in the game. So it feels like the first time that you saw Caleb Williams, like, okay, I'm going to let it rip. Like DeAndre Swift in the running game is going to give me a little, I need to chuck, throw to these guys. I have a lot of weapons. This is the strength of our team right now. The receivers, the depth, and the tight ends, when healthy, Colston and Loveland was a little bit banged up coming this game, but they still had a lot of playmakers around the quarterback, and this is what we want to see. Like Ben Johnson's figuring it out with all these guys, and it was nice to see. Look, the first 2 weeks, the Packers, we know tough defensively they are. Playing in Detroit is hard. So, again, you're not always going to get those type of matchups, and when you have easy defenses to break down like the Cowboys and Raiders back-to-back, you should go off in those games.
A.J. Brown finally had a big game after being a ghost the first 2 weeks. Listen, all they need is that the opponent can put up points and stop the run a bit, right? And they get the Buccaneers next week, who Baker can put up points against the Eagles, and the Buccaneers run defense is pretty good. So that's all you can really – A.J. Brown's going to go up and down depending on what the Eagles need in that given game. But at least we saw it. Like, it hurts just throw to A.J. Brown. He's a beast. 3 other wide receivers that are looking really good through 3 weeks. Garrett Wilson, and he gets Miami next week. He scored 19 or more points in 2 of 3 weeks this season. Ricky Pearsall has over 100 receiving yards in 2 of 3 weeks and gets Brock Purdy back next week. He gets the Jaguars next week. Keep plugging him in. And then Cortland Sutton is looking like he did last year with these touchdowns coming his way. The Broncos offense isn't looking great, or Bo Nix. Bo Nix had another bad game. But Cortland Sutton put up 20.8 fantasy points with 118 yards and a touchdown. In week 1, he scored 15 fantasy points in half PPR, so only 1 dud week for Sutton so far. I think you can feel good about him. And then 2 tight ends, Hunter Henry with 11 targets, 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's a big part of this offense with Drake May. He had 8 targets in week 1, 11 targets in week 3. And Jake Ferguson now with 26 targets over the last 2 weeks. Jake Ferguson needs to start scoring touchdowns, but the targets are there, the receiving yards are there, and with no CeeDee Lamb, I don't see that going down. If CeeDee Lamb has to miss any time with the high ankle sprain, I don't see that declining anytime soon.
Yeah, we told you a lot about these sleeper tight ends. I mean, Zach Ertz has come through in a couple games. We've seen Brenton Strange do well in 2 of the first 3 games here, Tyler Warren. We said this was a sweet spot. Then you have Jake Ferguson around there, 12, 13, wherever he was on the board, and Hunter Henry a little bit lower, 16, 18 in that Ertz range. So we told you a lot about this in the preseason, that this is where to look, and we've talked about the chemistry between these quarterbacks and these tight ends. Now, quickly looking, I mean, Ricky Pearsall, things have worked out perfectly for him. Not only has the Debo thing and Brandon Ayuk, but now Jawan Jennings is missing time. George Kittle is missing time. Ricky Pearsall has gone from the 3rd option to the number 1 option. It doesn't matter if it's Mac Jones or Brock Purdy's expected return for the Jaguars game. Nothing scary about that this week. And then, yeah, the Eagles, you just need them to have to throw, right? And maybe this will say, hey, we should be throwing from the get-go. We don't want to just run and grind and win games that way. And look, I figure more teams will also try to stop Saquon, which will open things up. So, like, you want a game where all of them get going, and maybe now we'll have that, because I think that's what they're going to have to do to beat the Buccaneers, just unleash their entire offense. So that should be good going forward. And then Wilson, we'll see. I don't know if we want Taylor or Fields in this game against the Dolphins on Monday night, but Wilson's talent is rising. And then Cortland Sutton, look, all the worries about Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims taking his job, I think we can rest on that one for now. He's still the go-to guy, and Bo Nix needs him.
Yes, absolutely. Now let's transition over to the waiver wire priorities. We already talked about Trey Benson. He's obviously going to be the top guy if he's available in your league, but we have some others that are looking up that you can grab as well if you're in a pinch. We'll get to that to close out today's episode right after a quick break.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward is, look, you have to go the Eagles and what they did at the end of the game. Jordan Davis blocking the field goal, returning it all the way the other way. If you had the Eagles, that put them to cover. If you had the Eagles defense, you love that because you got that as well. It was the moment that defined the game because Josh Riccardi hits that field goal, the Rams win it. So there's no question that was the moment that defined any game this weekend here. And really, when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is almost at week 4. One more game between the Lions and Ravens in week 3. The FanDuel app is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer right now. New customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. But FanDuel is so easy because it fits however you like to bet, player props, building same-game parlays, or even jumping in for live game action. Quick, easy, and the best way to add a little bit more energy to your Sunday action. So are you ready to play? Just download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Get it in time for Monday Night Football. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue and close the show. So is there any doubt who the number one pickup on the waiver wire is? I mean, if he's still out there, I don't know exactly his ownership percentages, but I think when you look at Trey Benson, he could be a season saver for a lot of people.
Yeah, if Trey Benson's out there, you're using your priority on him. You're using up your fab if you're in a fab league where you have to use your budget. That's going to be the biggest pickup by far. Now, 2 other guys, though, that could be big pickups, especially Tyquan Thornton. Let's start with him because Tyquan Thornton, again, another big game for the Chiefs. He keeps getting open deep, right? And he dropped that one touchdown. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it like a bad drop. It was just a tough catch to come down with. And then the very next play, it's the same exact thing. And he catches it this time. And it was a hard catch to make, and he made it. So I know like Xavier Worthy's not there, but I actually don't see his role changing that much. Like Xavier Worthy's role, I feel it's more that like highly targeted guy, like a Juju or a Hollywood Brown, whoever they decide to target that week, with Thornton still going to get open deep and it'll probably just make his job actually easier to get open deep. Now, maybe once Rashee Rice is back and they have Xavier Worthy, that's when Thornton won't be really helpful. But I think Thornton for the next few weeks, at least until Rashee Rice is back, he's a guy that has high upside in any given week.
Yeah, they're showing exactly what they're doing, right? They want the big play stretchability, and Marquise Hollywood Brown has been a little bit inconsistent with that, and he's lost a few steps, I think. So Tyquan Thornton gives him that deep stretching thing that Xavier Worthy would have. And then we know that Juju Smith-Schuster is essentially filling in the Rashee Rice kind of big slot role for this team. So they're giving you exactly what we thought here with the Chiefs. And look, the Chiefs offense, I know it's hard to say it's pointing up here. It is the Ravens next week, so you figure they're going to have to put up some points. The Ravens secondary is not necessarily the biggest shutdown secondary, so it could continue definitely for Thornton here this week. And Alec Ironman, another guy that just having to get it done because the Titans really don't have anyone else. So those are the priorities, I would say, at wide receiver. Now, going back to running back, again, you can start to speculate a little bit more. Ollie Gordon did score for the Dolphins against the Bills. He had Chris Rodriguez leading the backfield as well with now Jeremy McNichols to cut into Bills' use in Washington. Where are you going with those 2 selections?
Yeah, I don't really want to touch the Commander. Like, I don't want to pick up another option from the Commander's backfield, right? Like, if you're going to go with one, it is Bill Krosky-Mara. I do think he has the most upside. So I'm going to stay away from Chris Rodriguez, even though he did get the most carries in this first game without Austin Eckler. Ollie Gordon is very interesting because I do think they want that power back to go with Devin Achane. And he saw 9 carries this last week. He's still only 25% of the snaps, but it does look like, why wouldn't they make him the goal line back? I mean, he succeeded this last week. He's much bigger than Achane, and Achane and this whole Dolphins offense has really struggled around the goal line for quite a while now. So I do expect Gordon to get those carries around the goal line, to keep getting maybe 50-50 split like it almost was this last week in the backfield as more of the power back. So I like Ollie Gordon a lot, and I think he needs to be picked up. If Trey Benson's out there, Ollie Gordon would be not out on your waivers. Ollie Gordon would be my next highest priority at the running back position.
Yeah, that's a good call for sure. I mean, again, but the backfield gods haven't given us a lot here in terms of guys falling from the sky that can really help our teams. I think we've seen it a little bit more quarterback, where there's always a myriad of options. Now, wide receiver, we talked about Thornton and like Imanor, but these couple guys need a lot more attention. Look, I'm watching the Seahawks highlights, and it's like Torrey Horton is always doing something. He's either having a big return or a big catch. He's clearly the big play go-to guy for this team. And keep in mind, the coordinator here, Clint Kubiak, he was in New Orleans. I think he's his new Rashid Shaheed, Michelle, to make a loose comparison here, that he's the guy that he loves. He can do a little bit of everything. He's just got a lot of speed to burn. So should he be rostered? Another guy, look, the Raiders were talking about, are we going to go get another receiver? Is Amari Cooper back and he retired? Now, Trey Tucker is ending up being a factor here, of course, for the Raiders. So Trey Tucker, Torrey Horton, where you're going there, and is Horton just being overlooked now?
I like Horton, and I do think he can be rostered and on your bench if you want to like keep waiting for him to see if he can keep breaking out as the season goes on. Because this week, I mean, he looked great, right? Had the receiving touchdown and the rushing touchdown. Rushing touchdowns are hard though thing to depend on. Still only 4 targets in each of the last 2 games. Still only 32 receiving yards in each of the last 2 games. So it's not like I'm dying to start Torrey Horton, but if you have room on your bench, I would like to hold him to see if he can keep progressing throughout his rookie season, because I loved Horton coming out of school, and I was shocked with how far he fell in the NFL draft. Now with Trey Tucker, I mean, I don't think this is a guy we can start to keep ignoring, right? Week 1, he gets 54 yards and a touchdown. Week 2, he gets 8 targets. Now, it didn't end up turning into anything. It was 3 receptions, 12 yards. So we ignored those 8 targets. But then this week, another huge targeted game with 9 targets. And this time he came through with 8 receptions, 145 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So it doesn't seem like these rookies for the Raiders are stepping up big time just yet. Trey Tucker might be a guy, like, I mean, you can't keep ignoring. How long do we just keep ignoring it for?
Yeah, I think what's happening with the Raiders is because their offensive line stinks, they're not being able to run the ball with Ashton Genty. Their defense stinks, so they're not being able to play with leads. So what happens? Volume for Geno Smith. And what happens there? He's got to spread around, because he can't just be about tight ends and Jacoby Myers, right? So he's got to get a third guy or second receiver involved. And that's what you're seeing a little bit with the Raiders. So I think they're throwing a lot more than they wanted to, than maybe we expected to, but sometimes it happens. You cannot run effectively. You're going to have to throw, and then it opens up somebody to be effective. So Trey Tucker definitely needs to be considered rostering here. Look, the matchup is not bad against the Bears, right, this week. I mean, we like the Cowboys. It didn't materialize because CeeDee Lamb went down. But if you're desperate, I think you can play Trey Tucker. And also the bye weeks are coming, so you might need a little depth coming forward.
Yeah, Tucker's playing at 90% or more of the snaps in each of the first 3 games of the season. He's a big part of this offense. Lastly, if you need a quarterback to pick up with the injuries going around, Carson Wentz, I mean, looked good, right? He didn't have a massive fantasy game. It was only just 16 points in a 4-point passing touchdown league, but 2 touchdowns. He looked good, and they just didn't need him at the end, right? They were able to let him rest on the bench. Jordan Mason kept stealing the touchdowns. Wentz gets the Steelers next week. I think he's a fine pickup and start if you need a quarterback this week.
Yeah, some things are developing too. Brock Purdy looks like he might be able to return against the Jaguars. Tyrod Taylor may be back on the bench if Justin Fields clears concussion, so that could also free things. We can't really feel good about Jake Browning in Denver. So there's some really streaming options that are falling apart. Daniel Jones, I think, has been added in a lot of leagues. So yeah, I do like Wentz. They just need somebody to slow down the running game a little bit. I think the Steelers fixed a few things from their first couple of weeks. So that could also be a sneaky high-scoring game out there in Dublin to wake up to some points and some fantasy scores.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for today's episode. We'll be back tomorrow getting into our positional rankings for week 4. We'll start with quarterbacks and tight ends on tomorrow's show. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.